Before I dive in, here's a quick summary to draw you in. I never expected that a simple walk through the university halls with my grown nephew would change the way I saw both him and myself. What he had to say that day opened a door I didn't know was closed. You won't want to miss how it all unfolded. Tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy moments that feel honest, warm, and real, please remember to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It truly helps. Now, let me take you back to that afternoon. The university corridors still smelled like old textbooks and polished floors, a scent I hadn't realized I missed. I was visiting to give a guest talk for one of the community programs, never expecting that my nephew Daniel, now in his mid-20s and finishing his graduate work, would ask to walk with me afterward. He'd grown into one of those calm, quiet men whose thoughts always seemed a little deeper than their words. He kept pace beside me, hands in his pockets, looking around as if the walls were whispering to him. I could tell he was carrying something inside, the way family members sense things without trying. But I didn't press. I'd learned that adults, even ones we used to babysit, open up only when they feel safe. We passed a row of tall windows. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the floor like long ribbons. Students hurried by, some laughing, others lost in their own worlds. Yet with Daniel, everything felt unusually still, as if the hallway existed only for us. "Aunt Marlene," he finally said, his voice steady but softer than usual, "I asked you to walk with me because, well, I've been needing to talk to someone who actually listens." The words made me slow my steps. I looked at him, not as the boy who used to chase fireflies, but as a man bearing something weighty. "I'm here," I told him, keeping my tone gentle. "What's going on?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a deep breath and looked ahead, as though he needed to see the path before he spoke about it. I matched his silence, letting it be a place where he could gather himself rather than a gap that needed to be filled. We walked past a bulletin board cluttered with flyers, tutoring sessions, alumni gatherings, lost water bottles, all pieces of other people's stories. I wondered what part of his story he was about to share with me. Finally, he said, "I've been struggling with something for a while, and I didn't know who to talk to about it. But then I thought of you. You've always understood things without judging." The sincerity in his voice reached deeper than I expected. It warmed me and worried me at the same time. I touched his arm lightly, just to remind him he wasn't alone. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." He nodded, eyes glancing toward the tall doors at the end of the hall. "I just need to know you're ready for it." His words carried a quiet tension, not frightening, not troubling, just full of meaning I hadn't yet understood. But I felt something shift inside me, a sense that this moment was leading us both toward a kind of clarity we didn't even know we needed. And then he said, "There's something I need to tell you before I can move forward with my life." That was where the real story began. For a moment, we stood at the end of the hallway, where the tall doors opened into the courtyard. The air outside carried the cool edge of early fall, the kind that wakes your senses without startling them. Daniel paused there, as though crossing that threshold meant crossing into whatever truth he'd been holding back. "Let's sit for a minute," I suggested. There was a small bench near a cluster of maple trees, the leaves already turning gold. He nodded, and we walked over quietly. When we sat down, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground. I could see the effort building in him, like he was sorting through pieces of a puzzle he wasn't sure how to explain. "You know," he began, "growing up, I'd always thought I had everything figured out. But lately, I've felt lost in ways I didn't expect." I listened, hands folded in my lap. Sometimes a grown child, whether yours or simply part of the family, needs someone who doesn't rush to fix things. He continued, "My program is demanding. Everyone around me seems so sure of themselves, and I keep wondering if I'm even walking the right path." There it was. Not a crisis, not something dramatic, just the quiet weight of adulthood settling on his shoulders. A familiar weight, one I remembered all too well from my own younger years. I think everyone feels that way at some point, I said softly. Even the people who look the most confident. He finally met my eyes, and there was something vulnerable there. You never seemed unsure when I was growing up. I laughed gently. Oh, Daniel, I just got better at hiding it. Inside, I was questioning myself all the time. He let out a slow breath, almost a sigh of relief. I guess I needed to hear that from someone who's lived a little longer than I have. The breeze stirred the leaves, scattering a few around our feet. The courtyard was quieter than the hallway, just a couple of students sitting under a tree, someone passing by with a backpack slung over one shoulder. Life moving on, calmly. What's making you doubt yourself the most? I asked. He hesitated, then said, It's not just school. It's life in general, expectations, decisions. Feeling like I have to be reliable even when I don't feel steady inside. His honesty reached into me, stirring something protective yet proud. He wasn't seeking approval, just understanding. I took a slow breath. You don't have to have everything figured out right now, and you don't have to carry it alone. Talking about it doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. He looked away for a moment, blinking thoughtfully. You know, I was afraid you'd see me differently if I admitted all this. Differently? I shook my head. No. More clearly, maybe, but not differently. He smiled then, a small, grateful smile that softened the seriousness between us. The tension didn't disappear, but it settled into something more manageable, something shared. There was still something he hadn't said yet, though. I could feel it. His earlier words, "There's something I need to tell you," still hung in the air like a bookmark waiting to be turned. He shifted slightly, sitting up straighter. "There's more," he said. "Something I haven't been able to tell anyone else." The moment felt poised, like the pause between an inhale and an exhale. "I'm listening," I said. And he prepared to open the part of his heart he'd been protecting the longest. Daniel sat quietly for a few seconds, as though he needed to gather the courage to take the next step. The courtyard had grown even calmer, the late afternoon sun settling lower, casting long shadows across the stone paths. It felt like the world had given us a private moment. "Aunt Marlene," he said slowly, "the truth is, I've been afraid of disappointing everyone. Not just my professors or my parents, but you too." I felt his words settle in my chest with unexpected weight. Of all the reasons he could have held back, I hadn't imagined that one. "Me?" I asked gently. "Why would you think that?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from when he was much younger, though now it was edged with a grown man's self-awareness. "You've been someone I look up to my entire life. You always seemed steady, grounded, sure of who you were. And I guess I wanted to make you proud by being the same way." I took in a slow breath. His voice wasn't shaking, but the emotion behind it was clear. This wasn't just self-doubt. It was a longing to be understood. "You don't have to earn my respect," I told him softly. "You already have it, not because you're perfect, but because you try, because you care, because you're honest enough to admit when things are hard." He looked down at his hands, as though taking in the words piece by piece. "I didn't want you to see me struggling," he said, "especially now that I'm supposed to be building my future." "I understand," I said. "But listen, growth doesn't come from pretending we're steady. It comes from learning what steadiness actually feels like, even if it takes a while to find it." He let out a quiet breath, and something seemed to soften in him, an easing of pressure he had carried alone for too long. "I guess I needed someone to tell me it's all right not to be certain," he murmured. "It's more than all right," I replied. "It's human." A few leaves drifted down from the maples above us, landing near our feet. For a moment, we just watched them, letting the silence shape itself into something calm instead of tense. Then Daniel spoke again, this time more quietly. "There's one more thing. The real reason I asked you to walk with me today." I turned toward him, giving him my full attention. He continued, "I've been offered an opportunity. A big one, but it means leaving the state for at least a year, maybe longer." I felt the shift immediately, not disappointment, but the kind of surprise that pulls your mind in two directions at once. Proud of him, and yet suddenly aware of how much I'd miss having him close. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked. "Because I don't know if I'm ready," he said. "I don't know if I'm capable enough, or if leaving would be the wrong choice. And before I told anyone else, I needed to talk to someone who'd tell me the truth without pushing me." The responsibility of that trust settled gently on me. He didn't want a cheerleader or a critic. He wanted clarity, connection, someone who saw him fully. "Daniel," I said, "whatever this opportunity is, you're not choosing between being brave or being unsure. You're choosing between standing still and growing. They aren't opposites." He absorbed that, nodding slowly. "I just needed someone who believes in me," he whispered. "I do," I said, "more than you realize." His shoulders eased, tension giving way to something steadier. But I could sense that the conversation wasn't finished. Not yet. There was still something he hadn't said, something tied to that opportunity, something that mattered deeply to him. He looked up, meeting my eyes with a seriousness that made the moment feel almost suspended. "There's a part of this decision," he said, "that depends on what I tell you next." Daniel took a slow breath, as though the next words carried the weight of the whole afternoon. The sun had dipped lower behind the buildings, leaving the courtyard washed in a warm, amber glow. Students drifted by now and then, but the world still felt narrowed to just the two of us. "What I haven't told you," he said, "is that the opportunity is a fellowship, a really competitive one. And somehow, I got it." I felt a quiet surge of pride. "Daniel, that's incredible. Why didn't you lead with that?" He gave a small, uneasy smile. "Because the moment they offered it to me, instead of celebrating, I panicked. I thought, what if I'm not good enough? What if I go and fail? What if everyone expects me to be something I'm not ready to be?" I turned slightly on the bench so I could see him better. "Anyone would be nervous. Something that big is supposed to make your heart race." He nodded, but his eyes drifted to the ground again. "The thing is, they want me to start in a few months, across the country." And I kept imagining telling everyone, imagining their reactions, and suddenly I felt this pressure building. And I thought maybe I should talk to someone who's lived with big decisions and come out the other side. I let that settle for a moment, feeling the softness of his honesty. This wasn't just fear. It was a crossroads, and he wanted someone steady to stand with him while he looked both ways. "I'm honored you came to me," I said. "Truly." He looked up, and the uncertainty in his eyes had shifted, still present, but now mixed with hope. "I needed to know if you thought I could do it. Not because your approval decides things for me, but because your perspective means something." I took a breath, letting the weight of the moment touch me fully. "Daniel, you have everything it takes. Not because you're fearless, but because you're thoughtful. Because you pay attention. Because you don't take opportunities lightly. That's strength, not weakness." He didn't speak at first. Instead, he sat back slowly, letting the words settle in. He looked calmer now, more rooted in himself. "I think I knew that," he said quietly, "but I needed to hear it out loud." We sat there for a long moment, listening to the distant hum of campus life. A few leaves brushed across the pavement, carried by the breeze. It all felt peaceful, balanced. He turned to me again. "There was another reason I told you first." I raised an eyebrow gently. "Oh?" You've always been the one who reminded me that I could grow into my own life, not someone else's idea of it. I figured if I could talk to you about this, I'd finally stop doubting myself." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside me, an older part, a wiser part, the part that had lived long enough to see how guidance could shape a young person's path without holding them back. "I'm proud of you," I said, "not because of the fellowship, but because you faced your fear and chose to speak it. That's courage." His shoulders relaxed completely for the first time that afternoon. A sense of quiet relief washed over him. "So," he said, "you think I should go?" "I think," I replied, "that you already know what your heart wants. You just needed someone to see it with you." He looked out across the courtyard, the fading light softening the edges of everything. "I think you're right," he said. "I think I'm ready." We stood up together, walking back toward the tall doors of the hall. The moment felt different now, not heavy, but renewed, filled with the calm clarity that comes after choosing to move forward. As we reached the doorway, he paused. "Thank you," he said, "for being the person I could finally say all this to." I smiled at him, feeling both the tenderness of the moment and the quiet pride of seeing someone you love step into their life with purpose. "You're going to do well," I said, "and wherever you go, whatever path you take, you'll never walk it alone." We stepped through the doors, the soft echo of our footsteps marking the start of a new chapter, one for both of us, in our own ways.